I'm a visual artist. I'm here to talk a little bit about my artwork. Beauty, memory, and nature not only helps to give meaning to my life, but it also defines my artwork. And you see, memories make us unique. And I strongly believe that we're all memory makers. And given the opportunity to create memories, I like to create beautiful ones. You see, everything in my life, more or less, memories permeate everything, particularly my artwork. I take memories and I use them to explore change. In other words, I take the past and my experiences and I put them in a new context. I take the past, what doesn't change, and I use it to provoke change, or the absence of it sometimes. I also like to explore nature and beauty in my artwork, but most importantly, I really strongly believe that art should be informed by one's own experiences, not necessarily the other way around. Why? Because an artist needs a unique voice, and if you don't have that unique voice, it will show in your work. Whatever you feel the dishonesty. Art for me, like I said, is about reinterpreting one's memories. It's about showing the truth that's in your heart. But it's also about being part of the future before the future is here, being part of change before change is here. And it's not like actually some artists are wired for this, but it's not like you wake up every morning and I said, oh my God, I'm gonna create something that no one has done before. Change, change, change. There's a process to this, and it's important to know the past and it's important to know history, because what some artists do, we add to the history of art, to the artists that came before us. That's why I think the past and history is so important. And talking about the new, when an artist is fortunate enough to create something new, we like to protect that moment of that object from change. Ironically, it's the reason why we collect, it's the reason why we have antiques. Take, for example, Picasso's Damiselle d'Avignon, for example. Last time I visited in a museum, the piece is still the same, exactly since the day he finished it in 1907. You see, museums exist to protect things from change. Unlike beauty, which is something that I also explore in my artwork, the beautiful demands to be preserved. It is the reason why art and beauty go hand in hand. It is also the reason why we pay so much sometimes for art and for beauty. I was born in Puerto Rico of Cuban parents. I moved to Miami in 1980. I'm made of all these things. These are places where things have so many multiple meanings. Things are loaded with syncretism. I'm also made of my heritage and my own culture. Miami in particular is a great experiment. People there have been able to retain their culture. The melting pot theory, completely out the window. It's a place that forces you to be on the present. I don't know if it's the light, I don't know if it's the bodies of water that surround all of us, but I do have a friend that said that the best thing about Miami is that it's so close to the United States. The power to her. It's a very interesting place, I have to say. But growing up in Miami in the 1980s, I had a studio. There was a beautiful, thriving underground scene in the 80s where all the forces were clashing and blending and mixing. And they all manifested in a studio I opened called Imperfect Utopia in Miami Beach. And these forces, there was so much information, disorganized information during this period. These are the years before Google existed and started organizing our thoughts or our memories for that matter. And I embraced all these things. I embraced my reality. My mind became like a cultural collage. I like to say a hopeful jungle loaded with oxymorons. and actually the name of my studio, Imperfect Utopia. And embracing these things, embracing the Caribbean Sea, embracing all of Florida, from Disney World to Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth, the Taino Indians of Puerto Rico. When I embraced these things, I found my voice. And not only did I find my voice, but I also found the new, and I found what should remain static. And if some of you out there are trying to find your voice or trying to tell your story or find your story, I humbly suggest that embrace, first and foremost, home, your heritage, your culture, your own circumstances, good and bad, and especially the memories that stay with you. Those very personal things, those very individual things that stay with you, I strongly believe that your unique voice resides there. And from looking into those things, perhaps you can see something that can transcend and become universal. I also learned through my artwork that not everything new is great, and not everything old is bad. And this first image here, I think is a good example of using the past and interpreting it in a new way. Here, as a child, I was really obsessed, like probably many of you, with building sandcastles with Dixie cups. As an adult, these are the serious problems that artists have. As an artist, as a grown-up, here I decided to build 6,000 sandcastles, actually with my parents and some friends, to recreate that memory. But I'm building them here, not as a child, at random, but as an adult, totally symmetrical and structured, like if I lost my innocence. And you see, sometimes things don't change. We just present them in a different way. We see them in a different way. This next image here, the objects on the left belong to my grandmother. When my grandmother passed away, someone that I love and cherish very much, we didn't know what to do with her objects. The idea of disposing them didn't even cross my mind. You see, these objects had a lot of memory, and objects are embedded with memory. And it is the artist's role to activate this memory. We collect objects, or we have objects for different reasons. Sometimes it's for status value, sometimes it's just for pure value, social status, excuse me. But my favorite is that objects are embedded with memory. And Western African cultures, actually, they take objects into the jungle at night, and when a comet passes, they believe the object is activated. What I did here, the glitter represents that comet, and the blue actually is the color that evil can cross. We still use that blue color in some houses in the South in the United States. We use it in the front porches, in the ceiling, to protect us from evil. This also celebrates objects. I like to say that I'm celebrating consumerism here. I can't help it. I'm in love with objects. Yeah, I have to be honest. The image to the right, oh, by the way, where you live, look around and you may see some objects that you only keep them because the memory that it activates on you, they speak to you and you speak back to them. The object to the right, I have a symbol in my chest, and we talked a little bit about syncretism. We live in great times. I'm sort of like making up my own religion as well. Very interesting times. So, yeah, we have the chance even for that, so much freedom. So it's made of all these things that I'm composed of: the Caribbean, American culture, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hopi Indians, and also, in top of it, that was my self-portrait, I'm throwing my grandmother's ashes as a way of honoring her past and worshiping my ancestor. This next image here, again, nature was very important to me. This is part of a huge series called Backstories at Hope Sound. I believe that nature is one of the greatest sources, especially for me and for our work, because you can always go back to nature and the feeling of belonging is always there. For me, it doesn't change. And perhaps if you have kids around, introduce them to nature very early on, because as you grow older, it's a place where you can always go no matter what. It's there for you, mentally or physically. Keith Haring, the artist, once says, "The primitive will always make us new." It's like saying the past will always make us new. Or once you find your source, the possibilities are infinite. And by the way, when I did this series, I put so many bromeliads in my mouth, I got some allergy on my lips. Like grew up like huge. There's like 20 of these works. But going back to the source, nature, or when you find your source, I think it's important because it doesn't matter what you do, what your field is, if you don't have your source, the dishonesty will show in your work. Take, for example, the factory at Pittsburgh, New York. All these things reflect of Andy Warhol's artwork. Or, for example, say an African mask that made it to the hands of Picasso and literally changed the way most of us look at the world. And those are great things that we must know. But those are their experiences. I have my own experiences as well. And they are unique, like theirs, and you have your own experiences. You see, change and trends will always exist, but your voice, your reality, there's only one, and that's, for me, the source. I think we're showing here some images, some videos that inspired my work, vintage photos of my parents and of my work, and some of my work. My parents didn't have much in Cuba. But they did have photo albums. When they escaped the communist regime, they were only allowed to take 5 pieces of clothes and a pair of shoes, no photo albums. And the photo albums were very important to my mom. And so she conceived of a way of having someone send each photo at a time in an envelope so she can build her photo albums back again. It took her 7 years in Puerto Rico to assemble her photo albums in an illegal way. And I grew up fascinated by photo albums. It was a way for me to see a past that I couldn't touch and the beauty that came from it. I'm fascinated by the photo albums in our pocket. I'm obsessed. Artists get obsessed with things. Thank God minds are pretty healthy. It's a thing. So the photo albums in our pockets, in our smartphones, why we have them. And if some of those memories that are in your pocket stay with you, print them, make them something physical, memorialize them, make them something that perhaps doesn't change. It worked for me sometimes. This next, talking about things that don't change, this artwork here, I grew up with things that don't change, floats, cakes, altars, and particularly piñatas. Cuban, Puerto Rican piñatas, you don't hit them like Mexican with a pole. We're slightly less violent, actually. They have strings, beautiful, colorful strings on the bottom. And when it's someone's birthday, each kid receives a string, and a grown-up counts to 10. And when they count to 10, we pull them, the bottom breaks, and all these beautiful things, at least I imagine them like that, glitter, confetti, toys, candy comes. Beautiful experience that stays with you for anybody that is out there, parents. And I grew up with that piñata year after year, a new piñata, and I used to brag about it all the time. But looking through the photo albums, I realized that the piñata looked the same all the time. So I confronted my parents, again, a very serious matter. This is what artists have to deal with, heavily, brain surgery. Who confessed that the piñata was always the same. Year after year, the piñata was always the same. And, here I was all along thinking that we were middle class, that we have made it. Anyway, the memory stay with you is what I'm saying. And the piñata, the memory stays with you. At the end, I was able to do an artwork based on that memory. And the piñata, I made sure it was loaded with confetti and things, and recreated that moment when it exploded into a huge crowd. And it had a lot of tickets as well inside. I used actually confetti, something that contemporary artists should not use, but that's what we do. We rebel against it. So I said, oh no, so let's use it. So this last video, going back to memories, I grew up assembling the Christmas tree with my mother. She would pull out these boxes full of Christmas ornaments year after year. And it created a beautiful memory. These objects, the boxes would open and they were full of magic and beauty. When we moved from Puerto Rico to Miami, this time the photo albums made it, but not the Christmas ornaments. My mother had to sell them, my parents for money, and again, drama, traumatized. What do? Even at 15, I was trying to be a problem solver. I started collecting them. At the beginning was hard, but I started collecting them obsessively, and I have thousands of them, enough to probably decorate, I don't know, 5, 6 Rockefeller Center trees. And I'm still collecting them, it doesn't stop, because I wanted to recreate the memory that these objects had in them, it had embedded in them. So I created this artwork with these objects that provoke change and the absence of it. And not only that, these objects are embedded with beauty, besides memory. And I strongly believe that beauty is highly intellectual. And the embracing of beauty is a sign of courage. You see, beauty stays with us. Beauty haunts us. And I think objects, when they fulfill their destiny, it is beauty, the result. In conclusion, not everything changes. You see, Poe's poem, The Raven, is still the same. Look what happened with the Coca-Cola formula when someone tried to change the original formula. Come on. And your favorite song is probably still the same. Water is still wet, the last time I checked. We even try to protect cities from change. Try Venice, going to Venice. You see, the past is alive and well in the present, and we're living in great times that we get to go to the past. And change is necessary and inevitable. I got it. I got to pronounce that word, inevitable. Whoa. So yes, change is inevitable. But sometimes, like I saw somewhere, we're moving faster than evolution. And I think that pop culture, technology, the news, they're way too fast. You see, not everything new is great. And we think we live in a world of change, yet we surround ourselves with things that don't change. Memory, experiences, they give meaning to my life. They give context. Especially, I was talking to someone earlier, especially as I get older. They are what make us unique. Look at the photo albums in your pocket, in your smartphones. We are memory makers. And given the opportunity to create memories, why not create beautiful ones? Perhaps, given the opportunity, we can create change, if change is necessary, or perhaps interpret something in a different way, like I did with my little sandcastles. Or they will stay with us, beautifully, memorable, unchangeable, forever. Be a good memory maker, because memories will stay with you forever. And when you do it with enthusiasm, as a way of honoring and respecting that you are alive. Thank you.